And that's how she looks. The car whose appearance and general design had an element of secrecy for so long.
Hello, it's Liam from Unique Cars and Parts, and I'm down at the Trafalgar Motor Museum, or Holden Motor Museum, with Neil Joyner. Neil's kindly invited me down to take a look at this absolutely amazing collection of cars. I don't know how I'm going to get through it all, but obviously the first place that any Holden aficionado would want to start would be with this particular car, the 48215. Now, this was released in 1948 and has a 215 horsepower engine, and that's how they come up with that name. Is that correct?
Well, I believe that it was more like the 21 was GM's number for Australia, or Australian manufacturing, and the 5 was a standard Holden sedan. So you could walk in all the way up to HR and say, I want a Dash 5, and you would get a standard Holden sedan.
Now, when this was released, there was only one model, is that right?
There was, yes, I think you're correct. I can't honestly remember. We had some utes, and we had, oh, sorry, look, my history's not good enough to...
That's okay. So with this particular model, I believe there's only one. And back when they released this, you'd come in and you'd go to your Holden dealer and say, I want a Holden. And there wasn't a whole lot of, they might have said, do you want a Holden Ute or whatever, but basically you were buying only the one model. And then as we progressed up the line, there'd be different models. So you'd have to be able to say I'm after the FJ or the HK or the whatever.
Or the
business sedan.
Yes, exactly.
But this one became known as the FX. Now, I did a bit of research on this, trying to figure out, because Holden never officially called it the FX, and the best I could find was that certain car sales companies were advertising this as an FX so that they could get shorter letters, because you used to pay per character when you were advertising in the classifiers, because everything was paper-based back then. Have you got a better reason for why it was called the FX?
Well, we've had a multitude of people all come in and tell us where it all originated from. But the one that I believe is that the front end needed some upgrading. They were having trouble with the weaker front ends, and they were going to upgrade it. And the draftsman started drawing it under the engineer's supervision. And one of the draftsmen apparently said, what am I going to call this? And he said, well, what are you working on? He said, I'm doing the cross member first. Now his story, or their story, is that because it was a cross member, he said, well, there you go. It's going in the FJ, but there was also other things going on. So at that stage, they just called it F and X for being cross member. And that's where I believe it all started from. But
okay, so two different theories. It was called the FX by used car salesmen to save money when they were putting print ads in, or it was by the designer of or the engineer that was coming up with the cross members, and he needed to call something. And he was designing that for the FJ Holden, and he put it on the FX.
Yes, the last a few thousand of the FXs had actually had the FX upgrade. So it is probably true to say that there was an FX, even though the purists say there wasn't. But this one was one of the later ones, and if anybody wants to know, apparently the leaf springs in the back are wider than the original one. So that's how you can very quickly tell where your car is in the line.
Fascinating. I've researched and on Unique Cars and Parts done so many articles on Holdens and thought I knew it all, but there were two models of the original. I thought there was only the 48215, and the nomenclature was to call it an FX, but I've learnt that there was actually two. There was sort of an upgrade.
It was an upgrade.
Not a facelift, but a mechanical upgrade.
There was, yes. And the thing is that at one stage they were actually going to come out with an FG, and the FG was to fill in between this and the FJ. It was just going to be a bit of a facelift, but they thought that the FJ is not coming out till 53, 48 to 53 is a long run for any one model, and they were going to squeeze another one in there, and I think it was the beefed up front end was to go into that. But as it turned out, they kept it rolling all the way through, and then the FJ came out, and it was just a huge success at the time.
Yeah, was it their biggest success?
Oh, I think the HQ was probably sales-wise the biggest number of sales of all.
And the HQ is one of my favourite Holdens of all time. I think most people think FJ, EH, and HQ. But I mean, there's so many beautiful Holdens. So if I was to walk into a 1948, I walk into a Holden showroom, and I'm looking at this, and I say, and you're the salesman. I say, can I get some options? What sort of options could I be getting on this?
Very few. Very few.
Is the bonnet emblem part of the standard package?
If I remember rightly, that was an aftermarket job as well. So
is that a genuine NASCAR or somebody else?
That's somebody else. Remember, there was a little industry going on in Australia after the war that people coming back from the war and they couldn't get work and whatever, and there was quite a lot of people who made bonnet emblems and then would head off on Monday morning and travel all around Victoria trying to sell them. So,
Neil, you were saying that there were a lot of aftermarket bonnet emblem manufacturers in Australia, and this is one of them, and there were many of them, were there?
There was quite a lot. We've got a little display cabinet over there of about 20 or 30 different ones, but there was quite a little industry going where people would head off on Monday mornings with their weekend's work and tour around Victoria trying to sell their versions of bonnet emblems for various cars. So.
And when did the bonnet emblem fall out of favour? Was that, I think that they started to become longer sort of lines that would go down on the HK model. Was it before then that they sort of fell out of favour?
I would say probably around the EH era was probably when the emblems disappeared. But they're a fabulous bit of ornamental value, aren't they? I think.
I think they look great too. So look, this was to my eyes, particularly we've got a FJ Holden that we'll go across to in a moment. But to my eyes, this was a little bit bland looking. The fluted grille. But they spent a lot of time getting the emblem looking great back in the day. I think the emblem looks absolutely fantastic. And the interior. Now it had what you would describe as what is that?
That's an aftermarket pearl steering wheel.
I was going to say it doesn't look quite right. Was a lot of people put this sort of steering wheel on?
Yeah, a lot of people have done all sorts. When you do a car up, everybody wants to add their own little flair to it, and this one came. I've never changed it. It's how we purchased it.
Now the bench seats. This could comfortably carry 6 or legally carry 6.
I wouldn't want to be in there with 3 or at least 2 others my size, but yes, you were legally.
Two our size and 3 of a normal size.
And a little tiny fella between us, eh? Yeah.
And on the instrumentation, you got a speedo, it looks like a fuel gauge, and then a set of warning lines for oil, temp, and generator.
Yep. Yeah, that was it. That was your instrumentation.
And probably that's all you needed. Now the seats, they were leather or the leather?
Yep, definitely leather.
And they were leather for quite a while, weren't they?
They were leather right through. I think the HD was the last of the leather seats, and you would only get that in the Premiers anyway.
So the EH Prem had the leather.
Yep. Yes. Yeah. After the HD, they were all vinyl.
Now you've got wheel trims here. Those were optional too, weren't they?
Yes, absolutely.
NASCO, or again another aftermarket supplier?
Another aftermarket supplier, I think. Yes.
And the engine in this, what sort of horsepower did it develop?
Oh, it's a little grey motor that sort of went all the way through to the EJ. I can't remember what the horsepower of them was, but they basically didn't change the grey motor from 48 to 63.
So this motor was pretty much interchangeable with any of the Holdens all the way up until they put the red in the EH. Is that right?
That's correct. And that, in my opinion, was what the great thing about Holden. You could break down in the middle of the night on a Sunday night, go to the chemist shop, knock him up, and he'd have something to get you started. Yeah. Or, you know, regardless of where you were, you could always get something to get you going.
Yeah, and it was a great middle-class vehicle. We all drove Holdens, didn't we? Or my dad drove a Ford for a while, but I converted him. That's another story. Well, look, this is an absolutely fantastic car. I love it. And what better place to start than with the 48215 to become known as the FX. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.